Good morning and welcome to the second webinar in our four-part Maryland legislative series. While we can't be together in person and probably wouldn't have tried to with a storm coming in, we are thrilled that more than 100 people are joining us this morning. Before we start, I want to let everyone know that this program is being recorded. My name is Todd Rosenberg, and it is my pleasure to serve along with my friend and colleague Bobbi Shulman as co-chair of the JCRC of Greater Washington's Maryland Commission. The JCRC serves as the public affairs and community relations arm of the suburban Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC organized Jewish community, home to over 300,000 Jewish people, the third largest Jewish community in the country. The JCRC represents more than 100 organizations, synagogues, and the Jewish Federation in advocating for the needs, priorities, and values of the Jewish community, as well as the well-being of everyone in the Greater Washington area. Each year at the grassroots level, our advocacy work includes convening you, our community, for education and discussion, as well as for in-person meetings with legislators at federal, state, and local levels. This year, since we cannot hold our annual legislative breakfast in person, we are bringing our elected officials and our legislative priorities to you through this legislative series. We are pleased to have with us this morning the Honorable John Sarbanes, the Honorable Anthony Brown, the Honorable Jamie Raskin, and the Honorable David Trone, who will each speak for about 5 minutes on their priorities for the upcoming year, as well as addressing the JCRC's federal legislative priorities, which can be found in the chat box and on the JCRC's website at jcouncil.org. Following all the Congressman's remarks, JCRC's Executive Director Ron Halber will moderate a discussion. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, and he will try to get to as many as possible. Before I introduce Congressman Sarbanes, we wish to take the opportunity to express our condolences to him and his family on the loss of his father, Senator Paul Sarbanes. Senator Sarbanes was a deeply respected legislator, a true friend to the Jewish community, and he is sincerely missed. Our condolences. It's now my pleasure to introduce Congressman John Sarbanes. Congressman Sarbanes has represented Maryland's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. Congress since 2007. He currently serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, in addition to the House Committee on Health, the House Committee on Energy, and the House Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Probably a very interesting place to be in the next coming period. Congressman Sarbanes also serves on the House Oversight and Reform Committee and its Subcommittee on Government Operations. Since 2017, he has chaired the Democracy Reform Task Force, a bold effort in the House of Representatives to build a government that puts the public's interest ahead of special interests. He has led the efforts in Congress to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, with particular emphasis on empowering residents to take an active role in restoring it. He's a strong supporter of more affordable, high-quality health care and expanding educational opportunities through financial assistance programs. My pleasure to welcome Congressman Sarbanes.
Thank you very much, Todd and Bobbi and Ron Halber and all those who are joining us through Zoom for the opportunity to be with you today. I'm glad to be here with 3 of my colleagues from the Maryland Congressional Delegation. We all work very well together, advancing important priorities in Washington, but certainly among those are this continuing strong bond between the United States and Israel and in all of its various dimensions. I want to salute, first of all, thank you for the condolences. My father was as you know, a huge advocate of that relationship between our 2 nations and all that it means. I appreciate the remembrances and tributes that have been coming in over the last week or so. So thank you for that. We're in a very difficult moment. We're in the midst of Hanukkah, but we are also in the midst of this pandemic. We are involved in a lot of tricky transitions right now. We're transitioning politically, obviously, from one administration to the next. We see the light at the end of the tunnel with this vaccine that has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration, but we know there's still a lot we need to do to get through the tunnel. And people are going to have to continue to be vigilant in terms of these best practices in dealing with the pandemic. So the American people are juggling a lot right now, and it's putting a lot of stress. I want to thank the JCRC for not just the work you do all the time, but the special work that you've done and supports that you've brought to bear to the community during this very, very difficult time. The JCRC is a very trusted source of information and assurance and comfort for people in the community. And it's these kinds of organizations, I think, frankly, that are helping us push through to the other side of this very, very difficult time. As you know, we are right in the midst of trying to land the plane of another coronavirus relief package. That is happening as we speak. The negotiations are ongoing, so it's kind of breaking news with each passing moment. We obviously want to make sure we get something done before we go home for the holidays, as you were. And so that effort continues, and I want to thank JCRC for the input on important priorities there. That certainly makes a difference to the conversation. In terms of this continuing strong relationship that we want to support with the state of Israel, Anthony Brown can speak to it better than any of us because of his work recently on the National Defense Authorization Act. But with the passage of that recently in the House and the Senate, renewed commitment to the state of Israel, we continue to march forward with this 10-year MOU, which will bring $38 billion of security assistance to the state of Israel over a 10-year period. The NDAA also includes $500 million in terms of missile defense programs and cooperation, and a lot of other smaller programs that represent the innovative partnerships between the United States and Israel, and I think strengthens that important relationship. With respect to Iran, I know that's always top of mind concern in any audience, and we continue to be vigilant when it comes to Iran. We have to focus on maintaining the arms embargoes and other restraints that we put on Iran every single day. I do think it's important for us to restart negotiations around the JCPOA. I know that President-elect Biden has signaled his interest in that, so that's a discussion that I'm sure we can have as we move forward. Just a couple other things, and then I'll wrap so we can get to the to my colleagues. We have seen, obviously, some significant movement in terms of restoring or establishing, in some cases for the first time, normalized diplomatic relations between the state of Israel and its neighbors. Obviously, Jordan and Egypt have had that relationship, but with the Abraham Accords now, UAE, Bahrain, and then most recently now, just within the last couple of weeks, normalized relations on the horizon with Morocco. This is good news, but we have to make sure that as these new arrangements are being put in place, Israel's long-term interests are being protected, and the United States' long-term interests are being protected. Finally, a couple other things that we've acted on in the last year or so, very firm declaration with respect to the BDS movement, recognizing that the insidiousness of that in many respects, and I know our delegation has taken a strong stand with respect to that. And then I did want to mention the Nonprofit Security Assistance Program, because that's something that we've supported very strongly. I know there are dollars for that that are in the mix in terms of the appropriations bills that we're trying to get completed right now in this moment, before Friday, actually. And that's critical to organizations like the JCRC and other partnering organizations to make sure you can do your work and feel safe and secure. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Look forward to the panel discussion, and I'll step back and turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Congressman Sarbanes. Congressman Anthony Brown represents Maryland's 4th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Currently serving his 2nd term in Congress, he serves as the Vice Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and is a member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, the Committee on Natural Resources, and the Bipartisan Committee on Ethics. Congressman Brown is also co-chair of the New Democrat Coalition's National Security Task Force. In 1998, Congressman Brown was first elected to the Maryland House of Delegates to represent Prince George's County. He served as vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee and as majority whip. He went on to serve 8 years as lieutenant governor, where he focused on higher education, economic development, healthcare, domestic violence, and foster care. It's my pleasure to welcome Congressman Brown.
Thank you, Todd. I want to thank Bobbi as well as my good friend Ron. Let me say good morning to everyone. Happy Hanukkah. I want to thank the JCRC of Greater Washington for inviting me and my colleagues to participate in this morning's legislative series. And I certainly would have preferred to be able to do it in person. But as I mentioned earlier, in obvious reasons, that's not possible. But I'm pleased that technology has allowed us to come together to have this important conversation. I've certainly enjoyed a long and engaging relationship with the JCRC and its members, dating back to my first of now 4 visits to Israel, one of which included a vacation, my most recent visit with my family. I also want to thank Ron Halber for his leadership and his tireless efforts in advocating for the Jewish community in the National Capital region, always keeping us informed and apprised of priorities and interests and issues. So thank you very much. And then also let me just thank my colleagues. As John mentioned, we work very well together. Your federal delegation in Congress, including our 2 senators, our senior senator, Ben Cardin, and Chris Van Hollen. I mean, we really coordinate our actions, our activities, kind of covering as many policy issues as possible, sharing information. Our staffs work well together. So I just wanted to kind of restate what John had mentioned. You know, as we enter the winter and the holiday season, we face a daunting rise in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths due to the novel coronavirus. My home county of Prince George's has the highest number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 and is second only to Montgomery County in the number of reported deaths due to the coronavirus. My congressional district has 2 of the 5 highest case counts by community in the state of Maryland. So news of the first vaccinations in the United States certainly is a welcome news as we are now underway, beginning the early stages of vaccinating our entire population. And it can't be limited to the US population, but the world community against this deadly disease. And I think it's a hopeful reminder that, you know, this pandemic will end. But full vaccination and immunity is going to take time. While we wait, we all have to do our part to protect ourselves and others, and that'll require Congress to pass additional aid and relief for our communities. As you're well aware, now 7 or so months ago, the House passed the HEROES Act. Every one of your members on the call today supported it. It had, you know, important items, $75 billion for testing, tracing, and treatment. For me, one of the biggest priorities, support for state and local governments, which provide, you know, countless essential services, including healthcare workers, police, fire, transportation, EMS, teachers, and so many other vital employees. In that HEROES Act, we extended and enhanced unemployment relief and workplace protections. We increased SNAP benefits and additional funding for nutrition programs for our food insecure neighbors, and assistance to renters and homeowners facing foreclosures and evictions. However, President Trump and Leader McConnell persistently delayed aid for the American people. And while I'm like John, hopeful that this week it will culminate in a relief package, we have seen abrupt halts in these negotiations and turns and twists, often some outlandish demands. But now is the time. We just really need to focus on the numbers, getting the resources out to communities. So my colleagues and I in the House, and certainly all 7 of your Democratic members, continue to fight for relief. We've consistently urged the administration and Senate Republicans to come back to the table and deliver aid that meets the moment, protecting the elderly and the vulnerable. And I know these are priorities, what the JCRC and your your member organizations focus on giving healthcare and essential workers the resources they need and providing for struggling families and local business. And we need to deliver that for the American people now. As we grapple with the public health and economic challenges here at home, we need to also ensure global stability and security abroad. And doing so will require us to engage our allies and partners to address the world's biggest threats: Russia, China, North Korea, and of course, Iran. Israel has always been the United States' strongest ally and partner in our efforts to counter terrorism and other security threats in the Middle East. Support for Israel has been bipartisan and must remain so. We need to remain firm in Israel's continued security and right to exist, and continue efforts to bring peace to the region through a two-state solution and the normalization of diplomatic relationships with Israel's neighbors. And as John mentioned, we are beginning to see a number of those relationships normalize. But we need to go further to expand our partnerships with Israel and strengthen our ties. As part of this year's National Defense Authorization Act, we codified the $3.3 billion in annual U.S. defense assistance to Israel for 8 years, which includes an MOU for missile defense initiated during the Obama-Biden administration. In there's also critical aid needed to counter growing and ever more sophisticated threats to Israel, as well as to American service members in the region, and to bring regional stability. This aid will ensure that Israel has the resources to defend itself from the adversaries that surround it on all sides, and for Israel to maintain its qualitative military edge. Additionally, I've advocated for expanded research partnerships between Israel and the United States to tackle things like COVID-19, PTSD, and other public health challenges. And I think there's a lot of synergy between Maryland's economy, Maryland's healthcare and health delivery system, and that of Israel. And I know when I was lieutenant governor, I was focused a lot of time and attention on that. Cooperation between Israel and the U.S. can and will lead to, I think, greater innovation and economic opportunity. And I certainly will continue to be an ally for Israel in Congress. Just a few more points I want to make. Back home, there's more work to be done to combat toxic anti-Semitism and support the Jewish community in the United States. The annual defense bill includes an amendment that I offered, which would help commanders root out anti-Semitism as well as white supremacy. By identifying it, it's growing in our military ranks. Identify it, take it out, take it on, and improve our unit culture. We need to also continue to counter Holocaust denial and foster inclusive education through aiding community organizations doing the work to engage and inform. As we prepare for a Biden administration, I look forward to advancing these priorities and making progress on the House's For the People agenda, which basically is the foundation of the Biden Build Back Better agenda. So I'm looking forward to working with the JCRC, my colleagues in the Maryland delegation, each and every one of you. And thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share a few thoughts and observations.
Thank you, Congressman Brown. Good morning and happy Hanukkah. Excuse me. I'm Bobbi Shulman, and I serve as co-chair of the Maryland Commission of the JCRC. It is my honor to welcome Congressman Jamie Raskin this morning. Congressman Raskin, U.S. Representative for Maryland's 8th District, is currently serving his second term on the House Judiciary, House Oversight, and House Administrative Committees. Excuse me. In addition, he serves on the House Rules Committee and is an elected member of the Democratic Leadership Team. Congressman Raskin also serves on the new Select Committee on the Coronavirus Crisis. Prior to serving in Congress, he was a 3-term Maryland State Senator, serving as Senate Majority Whip. He earned a reputation for building coalitions in Annapolis and was able to deliver a series of landmark legislative accomplishments. They include marriage equality, abolition of the death penalty, decriminalization of marijuana, strong equal pay for equal work, and several pieces of strong anti-drug driving legislation. Welcome, Congressman Raskin.
Bobbi, thank you very much. Good morning to you. Good morning to Ron. Good morning to Todd. Good morning to all my friends at JCRC and my colleagues, Anthony Brown, John Sarbanes, and David Trone. I'm delighted to be with everybody this morning. Let me try to build upon what my colleagues have said rather than repeat all of the particulars, although I'd like to incorporate by reference all of their excellent points. We're coming out of a wrenching and quite catastrophic period in American history where we have gone down the road of becoming a failed state, a very wealthy state, but a failed state for large parts of the population. A failed state is one that cannot deliver the basic goods and values of existence to its population. And those include security from disease, security against random gun violence and death, security economically and financially. And so we were really teetering on the edge there. And of course, it's now too late for 300,000 of our people who have fallen to this pandemic in the wealthiest, most scientifically advanced country on earth. So we have gotten off the road to becoming a failed state, and we can get back on the road towards strong democracy for all of our people and a healthy, robust social contract. And so we need not just a new deal for America, but we need a new reconstruction for America. We need a period of active, buoyant, interracial, interethnic social progress for the whole population. And that means, of course, we need a massive COVID relief package like the HEROES Act, which we in the House adopted 7 months ago, more than $2 trillion in aid to the state and local governments, to K through 12, to higher education, the unemployment relief, the renters assistance, the small landlord assistance, and so on. We are hoping that this week we will close a deal on immediate COVID relief, and that would include food assistance, expansion of the SNAP program, rental assistance, expansion of the earned income tax credit, extension of the housing eviction moratorium, and so on. And this should become the foundation and the basis for continuing serious investment in our ailing physical and social infrastructure, the roads, the highways, the mass transit, the ports, the airports, the cybersecurity, as well as all of those programs that have been weakened so much during this period. At the same time that we reinvest in the domestic economy and society, we need to rebuild the basic values of US foreign policy on the basis of American ideals. And that means that our friends in the world cannot be the Putins in Russia and the Orbans in Hungary and Duterte in the Philippines and El-Sisi in Egypt and the authoritarians and the despots and the kleptocrats all over the earth. We need to make common cause with the democracies of earth, those who are investing in democracy and in human rights and in security for the land and the allies and the institutions and the values that make America strong. And of course, Israel is an important part of that as our strong democratic ally in the Middle East. I was very proud that last week on Monday, the House, on an overwhelming bipartisan basis, 396-3, endorsed a resolution I introduced to demand the release of all religious prisoners on earth and to end the tyranny associated with blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, and heresy laws, sorcery, all of these imaginary religious offenses, as we have hundreds and hundreds of religious prisoners rotting in prison here during Hanukkah and the Christmas period. We've got to put American foreign policy back on the side of human rights and the instinct to secure everybody's freedom everywhere on earth. I want to echo my friend John Sarbanes' statements about the specific partnership arrangements that we have with Israel, the annual security funding that we need to continue to appropriate as part of our security assistance arrangement with Israel, and then to build upon the new Abraham Accords to normalize Israel's relationships with its neighbors so we can make progress in terms of peace, reconciliation, human rights and economic development for everybody who lives in the region. More broadly, let me just close with this thought as we, let's hope, turn the tide in the nightmare of COVID-19 with the arrival of the vaccines, with the arrival of administration committed to serious public health measures. We will be able to deal then with the next outward circle in the concentric circle of crises that confront us, which is climate change, the staggering catastrophe that we are seeing confronting people all over America and all over the earth, with the loss of 4.5 million acres of forest in California, in Oregon, in Washington, with the spread of record drought, record flooding in some parts of the country, including in Maryland, in a number of places, including Ellicott City, which we know has been submerged with flooding and cars floating away in the middle of the street and so on, as well as the calamitous changes that are taking place in terms of the glaciers, the oceans, and so on. So, I think we are coming out of a period of governmental and political crisis, which has been grave. And now that just gives us the opportunity, with the government on our side, to address the social, the economic, and the environmental crises that are engulfing us. I just want to salute and thank JCRC for always being a force for positive good in our community, for organizing for people who have been the hardest hit and who are the most vulnerable. And I look forward to working with you in the coming Congress and in the coming years to address the manifold problems of our time. And I yield back to you, Bobbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Raskin. I am going to be with you in a moment. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman David Trone. Elected in 2018, Congressman Trone serves Maryland's 6th congressional district, which includes all or part of Montgomery, Frederick, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties. Congressman Trone serves on the House Education and Labor, Foreign Affairs, and Joint Economic Committees, where he fights for issues of importance for Marylanders, such as the opiate epidemic, criminal justice reform, mental health, and funding for medical research. While in graduate school, Congressman Trone opened his first store selling soda and beer. Through hard work and good fortune, that single store grew into a company with more than 200 stores in 24 states and 7,000 employees nationwide. 650 of those employees live in Montgomery County. It is this expertise in business management that he brings with him to Congress. Welcome, Congressman Trone.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Bobbi, Todd, and of course, Ron. Appreciate it. It's great to be here with my colleagues. I'll try and keep it moving. We're a little bit behind, but it's active engagement with groups like JCRC that really strengthens, our democracy, and you build a strong community. We're happy to share our priorities. We're very much aligned in Maryland here. The biggest step is this COVID package that John touched on. We've got to get it finished. It is wrong. It is wrong that we have not been able to do this. It's totally unacceptable. We can't meet in the middle, and it's hurting our country in an awful lot of ways. But we've got to help small business. We've got to help the workers. We've got to help the families across our country. But also, we've got to invest in those that are the most marginalized. And that's what we in this community, we do this. And the area of opioid addiction, the overdose rates with COVID up over 52% up on a record number of deaths last year. We've now lost over 550,000 people to overdoses since 2000. We've got $5 billion in this package that hopefully will stay. I've been advocating for. The other area is mental health. COVID has just skyrocketed what's happened around our country because of the isolation, anxiety, depression. We've got also a number of $1 billion more in a package for that. These are really important issues that folks that don't have a voice, and there will not be a vaccine. There will not be a vaccine for addiction and the mental health crisis that COVID has spawned. In the area of Israel, as everyone on this call is, we're strong supporters of the MOU, and we're going to continue to do all we can do to help, that maintain that relationship. It's our most important relationship. The summer of 19, my wife and I and all of our kids, every one of them, we all went to Israel for our family vacation and really let the kids understand what Israel's about. In the area of business, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business person. Politics is certainly not my business. But in the area of this area, Israel is startup nation, as we all know, and we've got to continue to connect in the entrepreneurship area, medicine, biotech, energy, scientific solutions, that we can work hand in hand with Israel and all the cutting edge technology that's coming out of there. We also co-sponsored the Expanding Medical Partnerships with Israel Act. We've got to drive down our dependence on China in the whole medical area. Our drugs, so many things are coming out of China. And if that shuts down, it's not good for the American people. The Abraham Accords, great step in the right direction. I attended those signings at the White House. It's got to be bipartisan. It's important we be there, even though Trump's a madman. At the end of the day, we got to continue to build on the normalization. We're paying attention now to the UAE. The sales of the F-35s is concerning. I'm working with Ted Deutsch to understand exactly how we maintain our QME in the face of that. Iran, 12 times the amount of uranium now in Iran that was allowed by the JCPOA. I was against the JCPOA from day one, along with Ben Cardin. However, once we passed it, we should have kept it. We should have kept going the road we were on. It was the best road we had at the time. Biden administration will take a new approach, but at the end of the day, Iran cannot obtain nuclear weapon. We have to have it verifiable. It's pretty straightforward. BDS, no place in our society. Anti-Semitism up 12%, no place. Security for our synagogues, mosques, we've got to get that fixed. I'm a huge supporter of the nonprofit security grant, which takes the money from 90 million to 360 million in the 21 budget. That's a big increase, and it's well needed. End of the day, happy Hanukkah, be safe, and thanks for advocating. Thank you very much for advocating for our shared beliefs.
Going on now. Good morning, everyone. And it's very nice. Thank you, Congressman Trone. My name is Ron Halber, and I'm the Executive Director of the JCRC of Greater Washington. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. And first of all, I want to say it's a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to have such a distinguished delegation with whom all of you, we have a very strong individual and collective partnership and a very warm relationship. And we're thrilled with the access and the relationship that we enjoy with each and every one of you, and proud to call you all friends who I've worked with for many years. So thank you for joining us this morning. In about the 25 minutes or so that we have, I'm going to try to get to as many questions as possible. And try to group them together. I'm going to first start by asking Congressman Sarbanes, and then rotate through our members of Congress and ask any of you at any point if any of you would like to add, and just add, so to provide you with that opportunity. So the first question this morning, as predicted by many of you, is about Iran. And we understand that the Biden administration will want to re-enter the JCPOA, which is the Iranian nuclear agreement. How do we address some of the agreement's serious flaws and ensure greater consultation on security between the United States and Israel to ensure that Israeli security needs are met? Congressman Sarbanes.
I think, look, you have a very strong and experienced and I think savvy team coming in under the Biden administration with Tony Blinken as Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor. These are people who've worked together before. They understand the critical relationship between the United States and Israel. They understand the importance of maintaining Israel's security in the region, and they absolutely understand the threat that is posed by Iran. They have a long history with those issues. So as we look again at putting the JCPOA framework in place, and I do support that because I think even though it couldn't obviously guarantee everything, it was really a major bulwark against Iran's developing nuclear weapons, you know, enriching uranium and so forth. And we've seen in the absence of the JCPOA that Iran is becoming more aggressive and provocative in its actions with respect to building that kind of nuclear capacity. So I think we got to get back to looking at that framework. Absolutely, though, my point is this, and I'll close with it. This team that's coming in that thinks strategically is going to pull in as much input and data and perspective from Israel and from other experts in this area to make sure that as we're designing that framework, it's done in a way that advances our interests and our interest in having that strong ally in the Middle East, which is the state of Israel. So I think the Biden team is going to be very sensitive to this. And obviously, as members of Congress, we're going to be vigilant to ensure that framework, when it gets put in place, is robust and can be sustained.
Thank you, Representative Sarbanes. Would any of our other members of
I'll
Congress like to weigh in?
I'll
Please,
jump in, Anthony Brown, and I'll reiterate what one of the points John made is, look, I think we're a lot less safe today because we pulled out of the JCPOA, regardless of the shortcomings of the initial deal, and there were strong advocates on both sides several years ago. You know, I remember I was running for Congress, not in Congress, looking at the debate, the discussions, and I remember, well, I said, well, let me reach out to my friends who, you know, follow this closely. Let me reach out to my friends in the Jewish community that are on top of these issues, and I'll get the guidance that I need to formulate, to help formulate the position I take, only to find that within this community of friends, there was strong disagreement as well. But nevertheless, I think the JCPOA put us in a safer place, only as evidenced by the fact that by pulling out of it, Iran has resumed its nuclear production capability. I do think that any you know, version 2, 2.0 or whatever needs to ensure that there's a more robust inspection program. I think that in terms of sunset, they need to be a little bit more realistic. And I think in the case of Iran, you've got to have a longer timeline for sunsets. And then the only other thing I would mention is that, you know, it's hard to really address Iran and its threat. And of course, you know, the nuclear threat is the most existential. But if you're Israel, you know, the nuclear threat is existential, but also the malign activities of Iran in the region, even short of nuclear, are a major threat to Israel. The arms sales across the region, their ballistic missile program. So I think that any discussion with Iran about addressing their nuclear program should also include discussions about some of these other activities that are threatening in the region.
If I can add something too, and I associate myself strongly with what Anthony and John Sarbanes just said. Let me just add a few things. One is that, of course, the JCPOA was not designed to deal with all of the problems related to Iran. It was addressed to a specific problem, which was the acquisition and development of nuclear technology, and not being in it has not helped us reverse Iran's nuclear ambitions. On the contrary, so I think getting back into it will give us the leverage that we need in order to stop that. But we do need to pay attention to the other things. I think this is what Anthony was gesturing at the end there. You know, the support for Hamas, the support for Hezbollah are a dangerous and unstable force within the Middle East, which has got to be dealt with separately. And also Iran's general miserable human rights record as a theocratic state. I mean, it is the biggest nightmare for people who live within Iran. It is, with China, the leading administrator of the death penalty on earth. I think maybe it's tied with Saudi Arabia or something like that. But it's been hellish for women, and it is not a place where that anybody I know would like to live. And there are people in Iran whose human rights need to be addressed by this administration. So I'll just close with the point I think John started off with, which is the people in the Biden administration, I think, share the values of the people on this call and want to advance strategic security, peace, and also human rights and democracy around the world. And I say that because I know these people really well. You get old enough and you start knowing everybody. Ron Klain, who's the chief of staff, was my law school classmate, along with John Sarbanes, and Jake Sullivan, we know, and Tony Blinken was a college classmate of mine. I mean, these are people whose values are all about democracy, human rights, strategic cooperation, and defending the people, the land, and the allies of the United States and the values of the country. So I feel good about where we're going in terms of the Middle East and specifically Iran.
Thank you. Representative Trone, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd jump in is that the key is, John pointed out, is you have the right people. And we've got the right people now at the table, and that's going to get the right result. But we've got to cooperate in this discussion with Israel and pull Israel into the discussion. We can't just go it alone and fill them in later. We got to be partners in this, work side by side. That's crucial. But at the end of the day, we got a bright red line. They can't get nuclear weapons. End of story.
Thank you. By the way, and Bob Stillman, a friend of all of yours, has put in the chat box that, and certainly JCRC shares this sentiment. We want to thank you all for supporting the Nita Lowey Middle East Partnership for Peace Act. Thank you very much. Second question, we'll now turn domestic. According to the media, at least last night, it seemed that the Senate COVID relief package effort would extend unemployment benefits, provide funding for COVID-19 testing and vaccination, $82 billion for school, $300 for small business, and extend the student loan forbearance and rent evictions, which was due to expire on January 21st. But unless there's something new, I understand it does not include, and does not include direct cash payments, money for strapped local and state and local government, and litigation relief. And I want to start with you, Congressman Brown, and ask you, what do you think of this potential compromise? And then we'll give others a chance to weigh in on that question.
Sure. Look, we're 7 months later, right? This is not May. We're no longer debating the HEROES Act, where everyone on this call, fiercely fought for a much more robust package, $3 trillion. Back then, I said if it doesn't have state or local aid, $1 trillion, and that was based on really a bipartisan pitch made by the National Governors Association asking for $500 billion, and then city and municipalities another 500. And for me, that was kind of a bright line because, as I mentioned in my comments, my opening remarks, I mean, just the essential services they deliver. But we're 7 months later, and because of the intransigence of the Senate, it's not likely to happen. But we can't let that be a reason not to deliver whatever aid that we can deliver today. Unemployment insurance, SNAP, some of the other things you mentioned. So I can support a skinny relief bill at this point to get that aid out there. I know that state and local governments are going to start their budget process. I know in Maryland, going out to Annapolis starting in January. States, have a requirement to balance their budget, so they're going to be cash strapped. It's going to be tight, but this is where we are right now. So I can support it. I'm glad that it doesn't. The Republicans have sort of abandoned for now the insistence on protecting again or providing immunity from liability. I think that's a policy issue that is better debated at a later time outside of the context of emergency relief. Jamie and his colleagues can handle that on the Judiciary Committee and send us a good bipartisan package to the floor. But so the short answer is, I think we need to get behind it. It's not a big lift financially, and anything we do today is going to provide important relief to families and small businesses, and it'll make the lift for Joe Biden come January 20th a lot lighter, because I think most of us understand that this is not the last relief, tranche of relief that you're going to see from Congress. I mean, a vaccine may be here, but the impacts on families and small businesses will continue well throughout 2021. So let's get this done now. Let's work with the Biden administration, get a bigger lift, include in that some recovery investments like in infrastructure, which Biden is talking about, and get some people back to work. So that's where I am now, and I'm ready to vote yes on whatever comes to the floor this week.
Would any of our other representatives like to comment on that question?
Ron, I'd like to, if that's all right.
Please, Jamie.
So the state and local governments have been forced to lay off more than 1 million workers. We're talking teachers, cops, firefighters, frontline responders since this nightmare began, and most of them since the CARES Act funding ran out. You know, we did pass the HEROES Act because that's what America needed. At the beginning, Senator McConnell was saying the states could go bankrupt. And this was a period when they were describing COVID-19 as a blue state disease, you know, as in the Northeast and so on. Of course, it proceeded to ravage the entire country from Florida to Alabama to Arkansas to Texas. And now, of course, we lead the world in COVID-19 infections, COVID-19 deaths, and COVID-19 propaganda and disinformation. The direct cash payments are also urgently needed because our people are desperate, and we hear from constituents who are on the edge of despair every single day. So I don't know if this process is over yet. I would like to see direct cash payments be part of this. I would like to see state and local aid part of it. I think that the employer in corporate liability has no place here, and this is a pre-existing ideological campaign that just doesn't belong. I mean, you know, there's relatively few cases, I think less than 200 cases that have even been brought in the country because demonstrating causation is almost impossible. But there have been some extreme cases where you have a captive population, like people in a nursing home, where the nursing home authorities document through their memos and their policies that we are going to keep sick and healthy patients together. We are not going to have masking. And this is, you know, gone on through the spring and the summer. And I think it's just, it cuts against everything we believe in terms of people's rights and keeping the public healthy, that we would just say we're going to pull down a blanket of immunity for nursing homes, for example, or animal slaughterhouses that have not followed the basic public health precautions. So I don't think that should be part of it. But, you know, as Anthony is saying, we'll see where our negotiations have gone. We'll see what our leadership has been able to do. But right now, you know, I continue to try to push for the strongest package we can get.
Is anybody else like to comment on that?
Yeah, real quick, I would just say Nancy Pelosi has been a master negotiator in this process from day one. What she comes away from the table with and presents to our caucus and recommends, I think, will have a lot of weight. We'll see where things land. The state and local is important, not just because state and locals employ a lot of people, but a lot of the people they employ are the people that are helping us get through this pandemic. So it's a double hit when state and local governments can't meet their budgets and they have to put those in place. And the last observation is the reason we've worked so hard to make these bills comprehensive in the face of these efforts to just pull out discrete elements along the way is it may be that for one family, the most important thing is unemployment insurance. But down the block, there's somebody who needs the SNAP benefits. And around the corner is somebody who relies on mortgage assistance or rental assistance. So depending on your situation, the priority you have may be the most critical. And that's why we've been trying to keep all of these elements in the mix. And you all are aware of the demands that and pressures on people in all these various ways because of the community outreach that you do. So that's why we've worked so hard to keep these bills as comprehensive in terms of the relief we're providing as possible. We'll see where things land in the next couple of days.
And Ron, I would just add, I think Jamie hit it perfectly on the immunity situation. You know, as an entrepreneur businessman with over now 10,000 employees across the country, we do not need that immunity. And if people violate it and don't protect their workers and customers, they need to be held accountable. End of story. That's where business should be. Do the right thing every day and you'll be fine. As far as the rest of the bill, perfection's the enemy of the good. It's not what we need exactly, but who cares? Pass the damn thing. Enough talk. Thanks.
Thank you. My friend Larry has, and a couple other people have basically hit upon the same stream, which is, you know, American society is polarized. The aftermath of the elections shows that a lot of people on the Republican side don't believe the election was stolen. And the question is basically how in this polarized America should Biden approach the Republican leadership, and do we think that the next 2 years are going to be one of legislative gridlock, or do you think there'll be some progress made? And I'm going to turn that to Congressman Raskin for discussion, polarization and legislative gridlock, and where do we go from here?
Well, polarization is the bane of our existence. I trace it to Vladimir Putin's campaign to inject racial, ethnic, ideological propaganda into our social media system with, Cambridge Analytica, and a very conscious strategy of trying to put poison into the bloodstream of America. And shockingly, it did reopen a lot of old wounds and divisions to the point where we saw neo-Nazis and Klansmen not even covering their faces, but marching in the streets of America. And the president, of course, identifying very fine people on both sides. I mean, you can't imagine greater polarization than that. We know that anti-Semitism and racism are the gateway to destruction of liberal democracy, which is all based on pluralism and inclusion of people from all faiths and all backgrounds. So, I think that we are going to need JCRC groups all over the world and community organizations to rebuild that basic social trust that has been eroded. We also need all of us to be in politics, to be constitutional patriots. That is, we have to put the Constitution ahead of our narrow partisan interest. I think that John Sarbanes' leadership on HR 1 is a good example, where he said this is not about advancing the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the Green Party or Reform Party or Independence. This is about advancing democracy in America so everybody can vote, everybody can participate, and the wheels of the system can turn much more effectively again. So I think we have to try to remove a lot of the incentives for partisan division and polarization. I mean, one way we can do that is a bill that I'm sponsoring on ranked choice voting, which has an amazing effect in terms of reducing negative politicking, because it says in order to win, you need a majority. And so, rather than going out and engaging in character assassination and slander of my opponents, I say, you love David Trone, great. I love David Trone too. If he's your first choice, can you make me your second choice or third choice or whatever? And so ranked choice voting, which is being adopted around the country, is a way to get away from that kind of zero-sum game mentality and to promote coalitional politics. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do to reduce that sense of polarization and to rebuild what Lincoln called, the bonds of affection and trust that should unify us as a country. I'm glad Senator McConnell said yesterday that he did not want any continuing electoral college pranks and games against Joe Biden, who won this election decisively with more than 7 million votes, which is pretty remarkable. He got the same margin in the electoral college that Donald Trump got 4 years ago, 306 to 232. So this is the way our system works. Now, the Democrats have a chance to give it a try. We should throw everything we can into it, and we should try to rebuild the country, with malice towards none and with charity towards all, to bring everybody back together.
If I could just jump in there, Ron, because I know
Please.
you asked as well, about Biden and his approach. Joe Biden has to be Joe Biden. He's been in Washington for 47 years. I think that's a good thing, particularly coming after a president and an administration that had, they were inept, they were incompetent, they had very little experience in public administration, in the ways of Washington. And, we can criticize Washington, D.C. all you want, but the bottom line is you do need people who are experienced in how to navigate the halls of Congress, how to work the executive branch with the legislative branch, with stakeholders, et cetera. Joe Biden has to be Joe Biden. He's going to govern from the middle. I mean, he ran as a moderate. He's a moderate. And I think he's got a real opportunity to be successful. You're going to have to be moderate in this climate. I'm not saying that you don't pursue bold goals and objectives, right? We should be driving down the cost of prescription drugs. We should be expanding healthcare. But when you've got what will probably be a Republican-controlled Senate, I'm not throwing in the towel, but I think the odds are it's going to be difficult to win both seats in Georgia. Even if you do, given the way that the Senate is their procedures, you're still going to have to govern from the middle. In the House, we're going to have a 4-member majority. We've got frontliners in moderate and Trump districts that are not going to be able to vote for anything and everything that we might otherwise bring to the floor if we had, 240 members. So we're going to have to govern from the middle. Nancy Pelosi's got her work cut out for her, but she demonstrated in this current Congress that she can pull Democrats together, and not just in opposition to Trump, but for things. And we had a really good agenda that we passed. HR 1, John Sarbanes, HR 4, up and down, HR from 1 to 10, great agenda. But I think it's going to have to be a fairly moderate agenda that is going bold in its ambition, but in a way that's going to pull Democrats and Republicans together. That's the only way you're going to get things sent to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for signature.
Anybody else like to comment on that?
Quickly, Ron. Yeah, I think a lot of this partisan division and polarization comes from the fact that cynicism about politics has sort of engulfed the country. And it's because for years now, this predated Trump. I think he's thrown some gasoline on the fire, but people have felt very cynical about government. They don't feel that it represents them, that their voice is heard, and that the democratic institutions have become sort of corroded. And so these efforts to kind of reform our democracy and lift up people's voices are critical, because when people are cynical, they become frustrated and angry. They deal with each other in a much more transactional fashion. Their representatives become cynical, and we go to war with each other. If we can restore confidence in our institutions, in the idea that the people's voice is actually being represented clearly in Washington and in Congress and in our politics, I think it starts to bring people back to the table with a common purpose. And that's the promise of some of these democracy reforms we're pursuing, like HR 1 and other reforms that are critical. And then the last thing I'll just mention is, when we lack confidence in our own democracy, it makes us less resilient to attacks on our democracy from other places. It's easier for Putin and others to sow discord and spread disinformation in our democracy if we start out from a position of not trusting it ourselves. So if we can restore that democracy, that confidence, strengthen the resiliency of our democracy, it's going to be better for us across the board. And obviously we're committed to doing that. I think that's a unifying theme to Anthony's point. If you look at the polls, the reform to our institutions, getting people's voice back into the mix, is supported by Democrats, independents, and Republicans. And the failure to address that will only deepen the cynicism and lead to more of this partisanship and polarization and division in the country. So we have our work cut out for us, but I think we have a plan to move forward with this.
So I think we will end on that note. I want to very deeply express my gratitude to Congressman Sarbanes, Brown, Raskin, and Trone. Our JCRC is fortunate to have a wonderful and warm relationship with you. Obviously, this was a fantastic call. We only had questions left on mental health, climate change, police reform, anti-Semitism, and the post-COVID era, which I'm sure we could have answered in under an hour, but we don't think it would be fair to keep you here an hour longer than you than you committed to. But we're very proud of our delegation. Again, we're very proud of our relationship and our friendship with you. And thank you for being here. On that note, let me turn it now back over to Bobbi Shulman.
Thank you also, Congressman Sarbanes, Brown, Raskin, Trone, for sharing your time and expertise with us, and for your deep commitment to our Jewish community and its priorities. We look forward to many more years of friendship and partnership. We invite all of you here today to join us again on Wednesday, January 6th at 8:30 a.m. for our third legislative webinar. We will be featuring State Senator Susan Lee and State Delegate Al Carr. This legislative series is free and open to the public. However, it is not possible for JCRC to provide this level of programming to do our advocacy work without your ongoing support. You can help sponsor this series for only $180. A special thank you to our current sponsors, Marilyn Wynn, Richard Goldstein, Jennifer Mizrahi, Jocelyn Krifter, Hillary Smith-Kapner, Bobbi Shulman, and Stein Sperling. To join in sponsoring the remaining webinars, make your gift on our website at jcouncil.org. Thank you for sharing this morning with us. We look forward to seeing you on January 6th. JCRC wishes you and your family a happy and healthy 2021.